So we're pretty much done now, and I just wanted to say there's a decent chance that Houdini might crash. You know, you're asking a lot of it. You're asking it to run many sims in a row and to do all kinds of renders and all kinds of crazy stuff. There's a decent chance that Houdini might crash. And so what I want to show you is, let's save it, and I'm going to close it and reopen it just to simulate a crash. I want you to see what it looks like when you reopen it. So here we are. I've reloaded Houdini and I see errors. Uh-oh. What's that about? So if I follow it, I can see our file cache is having a problem now. It seemed just fine a moment ago. The problem is that the various global attributes that the wedgers set get reset when you close Houdini. So if I middle click on this, you'll see it evaluates to nothing. It's wedge blank now, even though it should be wedge 0 or 1 or whatever. If you go back over to the tasks area and look, sure enough, it's folded up. It's closed for business. If I rerun it with a Shift V, obviously the wedge calculations take no time at all. And now if I click on them, it comes back. And now we're back to normal. So whether Houdini crashes or if you just close it and open it again later, don't be disturbed by the fact that those variables are missing. If you ran your sims, the same thing. Your particle seed would not have been set in the particle thing up here. It would have just been 0. You would have been getting a different sim all of a sudden. So once you start using this stuff, once you start putting global attributes in here like this that are being made by wedgers, you'll have to rerun the wedge when you open Houdini and click on it. So just so you know, that's how that goes. Some other stuff I would say include, we're going to do lots of frames, and we're going to be increasing the resolution. Eventually, as with most sims, you're going to try to max out what your computer can do. However many gigs of RAM you have, you're probably going to try to use as much of that as you can, because that's the highest resolution sim you can make. The thing is, once you're doing that, it's going to be very hard to run multiple sims at the same time that are all using all of your RAM. It doesn't really make sense. So what you're going to have to do is go to this little local scheduler thing we've been ignoring and say single. Unfortunately, that means that basically only run one of these things at a time, like only run one job at a time. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to come over to here. I'm just going to delete everything out of our temp area. And now that this is set to single, if I run it, when it comes up here, you can see it's not running both sims at the same time. It's running one of the sims. Now the one sim can still use any number of processors and RAM and everything else. It's not saying that. It's not saying only use one processor. It's just saying only do one job, or really just one job at a time. It technically, you see it says 2 here. I don't really know why, but it really is just doing 1. So that's the strange thing. The sad thing is that while that makes perfect sense for our cache, which is the main issue, it's also going to apply to a lot of our lightweight stuff down here too. So these things ultimately could have run faster if it was not set to single, but they're so fast anyway that it's not really a huge deal. We're also witnessing another interesting phenomenon. You notice that it didn't do both sims in a row. Sometimes it might. This time it didn't. Houdini will randomly choose, essentially, what it does next, while still adhering to the requirements of the dependency. Like, we can't run overlay text without running the OpenGL render first, so it still will do that first. But as these 24 frames relied on the 24 cache frames, technically, it did have everything it needed to run. Could it have just gone to running the second sim right after the first sim? Yeah, it could have. I'm not really sure what determines what order it goes in. It seems to be different. If you were to cancel this and run it again, it would be different, which is odd. But there must be some reason for that. But at any rate, it never violates the actual dependency that these things have on each other, so it ultimately doesn't really matter. I'm just running this again so you can see the behavior. You can see how it's only doing 1, and that we'll be able to assure ourselves that it still all looks correct. But let's just let that finish. All right, so it's all done. I mean, if you go look over here in videos, we can see, there it is. So it clearly worked. And there you go. I would recommend in general that before you redo these things, I tend not to rely on the delete this node's results from disk and all that jazz. I tend to just delete everything that's here. I mean, that's the beauty of having this directory. It's all just temporary stuff. Just blow it away. Who cares? I also tend to close Houdini and reopen it before running. I find that you can also kind of maybe cut down on crashes by disabling the cache simulation checkbox on here. It doesn't need, certainly, to cache a simulation if we're not even looking at it. The cache is this blue thing that shows up down here. Or I guess I just turned it off. There we go. This is when it saves the simulation in memory so that I can scrub through it later. But I'm never going to need to do that. When I'm running 7 wedges in a row, I don't need to keep this. So turning that off just means it'll just use less memory, and it's just less memory it has to flush later on when it's done. So those are all some fun tips for you there. I would say the last thing you need to know is that, and I believe I didn't say this already, but these files exist on disk now. If I try to run them again, if I say dirty and cook this node, it finishes immediately. I could dirty all these nodes, just run this last one here, and you'll see it immediately says I'm immediately done caching, I'm immediately done rendering, I'm immediately done compositing. Because these nodes are Houdini, they're doing Houdini stuff as opposed to image magic and FFmpeg and code video. But these things have this cache mode automatic. If they find that on disk already, then they won't redo it. And that's great, because if you're running 12 wedges and 3 wedges finish, and then Houdini crashes, and you start Houdini like, oh, I gotta do it again, you don't need to redo those 3 wedges that finished. It'll just say they're done. And it'll know that, and it'll just move on to the ones that didn't finish. Yeah, so that's a pretty huge help. So again, when Houdini crashes, simply just reopen it, come to this node down here, and just, boom, just rerun. Don't delete the stuff on disk, obviously. Just Shift-V it and go about your merry way and hope that it doesn't crash again. So that's it for that. And in the last chapter, I'm just going to talk about, let's construct the final look of what we're going to do here.